Everybody's eyes are fixated on the fight that is currently happening between Gojo and Sukuna, and after all, it is the fight that has been hyped up since the beginning of the series, and even though this fight will determine a big part of the upcoming story, I think that there's something even bigger at play behind the scenes, and that Kenjaku is the one who is behind it all. Now, before I get into it, I do want to reaffirm that this is a theory. Although nothing can be said for certain, I truly do believe that some bits of information we know, combined with some major plot points, I am over 95% confident that this theory will probably end up being true. So first, let me lay out the main parts of the theory. First is Kenjaku's use of Tengen. Remember when Kenjaku sat Choso down in the theater and basically told him that he could use Tengen to merge with society and that he would do this by creating a giant curse? Well, this is a theory within itself that Kenjaku will end up doing this, but this is a smaller part within a bigger theory. But to get a complete understanding of everything I'm talking about, let me give you the complete context of Kenjaku's relationship with Tengen and Kenjaku's relationship with the world governments. So to start off with Tengen, let's look at chapter 145 when Tengen is warning the main cast about Kenjaku. Tengen says that Kenjaku's goal is to force the evolution of all human beings throughout Japan. Megumi asks Tengen, well, why didn't Kenjaku just use idle transfiguration to turn everyone in Japan into sorcerers? But Tengen says that Kenjaku actually lacks the curse energy to do this. So here we learn that Kenjaku has a plan. He wants to have everyone in Japan become sorcerers, but Kenjaku actually needs a lot of curse energy in order to do this through idle transfiguration. So Kenjaku ends up changing plans. Tengen says that Kenjaku's method will be merging Japan's society with Tengen himself. Now, of course, the main cast is super confused by this. They ask how can Tengen being one person merge with an entire country of people? But this is where it gets really important. Tengen says, I am not what you see before you at this very moment. My evolved soul exists all around us. As I said, myself is now the world itself. A human who merges with me transforms into something greater than a sorcerer, is a being that is both there and not there. Alright, so what does this mean, right? Well, basically Tengen is not the character we see in these panels. Tengen has what you call an immortality technique. He just continues to live forever and he just can't die a natural death. But he needs to switch bodies because although he himself can live forever, the physical bodies that he lives within cannot, because physical bodies can only hold up for so long. So basically, Tengen needs to switch bodies with a special person called a star plasma vessel, and every 500 years he needs to go into this vessel, and if he doesn't, he just evolves. And that's exactly what ends up happening. Tengen ends up evolving before the main story ever even begins. Tengen also says in this chapter that because he has evolved, he is more like a cursed spirit than an actual human. So Kenjaku can use idle transfiguration in order to use Tengen himself. Alright, so now you have the backstory. Kenjaku needs Tengen in order to merge him with the entirety of Japan, and basically evolve every human in Japan. So let's skip forward to chapter 202, where Kenjaku sits Choso down and tells him his plans for the future. Before even sitting down in the theater, Kenjaku tells Choso, if I grab Tengen, Japan and maybe the whole world are done for. He tells Choso that if he merges Tengen with Japan, over 100 million people will become cursed spirits with cursed energy, and that even Kenjaku himself wonders what it would look like if that happens. And this is where we get that picture of a large centipede-like curse that is just standing on top of the city. You see, this is why Kenjaku needs Tengen. He needs to turn everyone in Japan into either sorcerers or cursed spirits, and doing this will create some large curse that covers a city. This picture here of this curse is what most people use to say that this is Kenjaku's final plan. And while I do think that it is a big part of Kenjaku's plan, it definitely is not the final plan itself. This curse will just be a huge player in a grander conspiracy that I will get into in just a moment. So we know that of course Kenjaku successfully beats Choso and Yuki and he captures Tengen. Now in chapter 220 we see Kenjaku walking with Tengen, and Tengen now has black eyes, signifying that he is under control by Kenjaku. Plus, Kenjaku does just blatantly say here that he has Tengen under his control, and Kenjaku reaffirms that he is still on board with the whole merging society with Tengen plan. Alright, great. So now that the whole Tengen Kenjaku society thing is covered, let's get into how this plays into the bigger conspiracy. Remember when Kenjaku went and met with foreign nations? The first nation we see him meet with is China in chapter 167. But this isn't all. We see much later in chapter 200 that Kenjaku is met with at least 3 other major foreign nations as well. In this picture, you would naturally assume that all of these people are in the same room as Kenjaku at the same time. But as the chapter goes on, none of these people actually appear in the same room together. This panel was more so meant to show that these 3 people were representatives for the other nations that Kenjaku actually visited. And with this in mind, the major nation that is the highlight of chapter 200 is the United States. Kenjaku basically sells the United States a dream. The same dream that he has been selling other foreign nations, and that dream is that there's a bunch of energy in Japan and that the people living there have so much of this energy that they can power things with their cursed energy. They even use Gojo as an example to say that Gojo himself can power an entire nation. Now, Kenjaku does use some cursed spirits to show the US government his power, and eventually he convinces the US to invade Japan. Now, of course, the US loses badly. Sorcerers from the Culling games combined with cursed spirits just completely beat the US army up. And we see that Kenjaku and Arame are actually talking in private about the US's invasion of Japan. Arame says to Kenjaku, "Sending armed non-sorcerers against Culling game players will heighten the colony's curse energy and end the custom preceding merger with Tengen. That's basically your plan, isn't it?" But Kenjaku says no, that's about 60% of it. Kenjaku goes on to explain that even non-sorcerers, when they die, emit a lot of curse energy. The entire plan this whole time was to not actually have these foreign nations come kill all of these sorcerers. That's what he told the foreign nations. There's a bunch of energy in these sorcerers and you guys can come have it. But the moment they got over there, he wanted to kill this foreign military power because killing all of them would release a bunch of cursed energy. But what happens when you kill the United States Army when they come in a mission to gather energy? Well, remember, Kenjaku went and met with other foreign nations as well. And now the entire world has seen the American army go to Japan and die. Now, the entire world doesn't know the true context. The entire world doesn't know what the Culling games are. They don't know that there's sorcery and cursed spirits and all of this. They have no idea about the Tengen merger with society. The only thing that people would know is the foreign nations that Kenjaku met with. They would see that America went on a mission to capture this energy, but were brutally murdered. And that is for the foreign nations that Kenjaku met with. For the entirety of the world and everybody else that Kenjaku never met up with, they would be completely ignorant about everything that happened. The only thing they would see is that the US army was brutally murdered when they went to Japan. So naturally, what would happen in the eyes of the world when they all look at Japan? Japan is now viewed as traitors to the world. They have just now massacred the entire US army. If the war hadn't started already because of this, the entire outlook of the world combined with news that would be ran in these foreign countries would just paint Japan as traitors to the world. But remember, Kenjaku already knows this. He doesn't care about this. As long as the army comes in and dies, then he'll just use the curse energy that emits from their bodies. And that is why Kenjaku said to Choso, well, the entire world will probably be screwed if I captured Tengen. You see, although Kenjaku never says it outright, I think that he knows something far bigger than just Gojo versus Sukuna is about to happen. Now that Japan is being very scrutinized and the entire world will have eyes on Japan as traitors, horrible negative effects will happen to Japan. And it's not even society's fault. It is all Kenjaku's fault. I honestly see 2 major things happening in the near future. Either Japan would just be converged on by a bunch of nations who team up and say, well, Japan must be traitors, or another world war would just break out. Because remember, this just doesn't end at Gojo versus Sukuna. The US Army has just been massacred in Japan. It doesn't just end with that, and we don't just get Gojo versus Sukuna and then, oh well, everything's over. No, the US Army has just been massacred in Japan. Other nations will see this and do something about it. Allies of the US will be forced to invade Japan as well, which is why I think a world war is likely to break out. Either that or Japan just gets collapsed on. Because think about it. There's no happy ending regardless of who wins this Gojo versus Sukuna fight. If Gojo wins, you would think, oh well, it's all over. You know, Gojo won. There's no big bad Sukuna guy anymore and everything will go back to being normal. But no, because Kenjaku went and conversed with all of these foreign nations and America has just went to Japan and died, this will cause a major unrest in the entire world's governments. And the big problem is that say even if Gojo wins, there's no negotiations with these other governments anymore because Kenjaku has already ruined that. Because just like you, we would both assume, well, Gojo is a reasonable guy. I'm sure if Gojo talked to these foreign nations, then things would be resolved. But these foreign nations have no reason to trust Gojo now. They already tried to talk to somebody and they talked to Kenjaku and they were betrayed. So no matter what Gojo says to these foreign nations, war would break out. So then you would have the main cast having to deal with an entire war on Japan. And that's if Gojo wins. If Sukuna wins, then everything's just even more screwed. Now Sukuna will be able to go on a rampage in Japan and have to deal with foreign invaders, and it would just be an entire mess of Sukuna killing innocent people, bad people, foreign nations, in just one big jumbled up war. Because although I don't see people talk about it that much, I truly do not see a way where the other foreign nations in the world as a whole can just ignore what just happened when the US Army went to Japan. Trust me, I thought of outcomes where, well, maybe the nations say, oh, that was America's business with Japan, we won't intervene. But that's not how world governments work. They're allies, there's enemies, there's a whole committee in the world for things like this. Something like a foreign nation going to Japan and the entire army dying isn't something that just gets glossed over. And I also don't think that Gege would just ignore this aspect as a whole. I would actually be very surprised if Gege just leaves the foreign nations out of the rest of the story. Because I think that Gege shows that he will include foreign nations. I think that that is the reason that Gege wrote Kenjaku going to the foreign nations in the first place. Yes, that was written in because Kenjaku needed more curse energy in Japan. But I think that Gege has shown that he will take it there. He will take it to these foreign nations getting involved with Japan and interacting with these sorcerers that we know in the main story of Jujutsu Kaisen. So with all of this being said, I truly do think that the main thing to look forward to is not just Gojo versus Sukuna. I've seen a lot online that people think that Gojo versus Sukuna is the end-all be-all for what will happen to the main cast. And while I do think that it is a big part, trust me, Gojo versus Sukuna is an extreme part for the future, I do think that no matter what happens between Gojo and Sukuna, foreign nations will converge on Japan anyways, and a major war might break out. I think that while whatever war is going on that is to come, Kenjaku will wait, stand by, and while this war is happening, Kenjaku will make his move. But I could be right, I could be wrong. The only thing we can do is wait and see. And with that being said, I want to thank you so much for reaching the end of the video. And if you enjoyed, then please leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as I do post on different topics that you guys give me and a few that I come up with on my own. Thank you for watching, see you next time.